Donald Trump is set to take oath as the 47th president of the United States in less than 2 weeks. And already he is making, even before taking oath as for another time as an American president, he is already making waves, especially as far as countries bordering the United States are concerned. And in particular, Canada, even though Greenland doesn't really border the United States, the Trump administration also has eyes on Greenland. So what's happening? Listen to Donald Trump himself on what he has in mind for the neighbor to the north.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what. Economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like. And it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
To get an idea of what Trump 2.0 means for not just Canada, but the world at large, we're joined by veteran journalist and documentary filmmaker. If you want to know more about Robert Young Pelton, Google him. But I'll tell you one thing. He was born in Alberta, Canada, and he is Canadian American. So Robert, you might not even have to identify as Canadian at all, considering what Trump is saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting time we live in because if Donald Trump keeps talking, he's going to basically control the entire world just with his mouth. But he's not president yet. So, and I'm sure the Canadians and the Danish people and the Greenlanders have something to say about it. But my feeling is he's acting presidential, so you don't pay attention to his legal woes.
Well, but Canada is in quite a tumult itself, isn't it, Robert? You just had Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resign after, or announce that he's resigning after 9 years. You potentially have Pierre Poilievre coming in, and Trump also alluded to Pierre Poilievre that he might not be Prime Minister. So a lot of things are moving.
There's been a lot of elections around the world in which people have been surprised by the outcome or by events. And it's very important these days to pay attention to what's actually real versus what's being fed to you. And a lot of sound bites or narratives or problems are always presented differently. So, Canada historically gets tired of politicians every, 10 years, and they swap them out. They don't shoot at each other. They don't blow up cyber trucks. They just simply vote and they get on with the next one. And like hockey teams and food, they get bored of it again and they do it again. So I don't have a problem with Canada, and I don't think that Justin Trudeau's resignation is anything surprising. In America, though, we do have a problem. We have a guy who wants to take over Canada, which is even more interesting. So I'm concerned about that because that is an attempt to stir up action in Canada.
You remember that Elon Musk got involved in the election here, and he started sending two opposing messages to people. One, something like, Kamala Harris supports Israel, and the other one says Kamala Harris hates Israel, and then sending them to opposing parties so they get all angry and not vote for it. And this is becoming more and more common, where the information that we put out there is measured, and then the weaponized version is sent back to us. The thing going around the States right now is that supporters of Trump are just waking up to realize that he's handed over the government to Elon Musk and these what we call the broligarchs, right? The high-tech guys that didn't vote or do anything, but suddenly they're telling him, do this, do that, do this.
Tech bros.
That's a coup by any other name, right? And I don't know how to deal with it in terms of explaining it to people, except that this happens all the time in Africa and third world countries where they don't have sophisticated political systems, right? Where they're inherently corrupt. But it's an education process to let people know that just because you can Google something or read something or talk to somebody doesn't mean that's the prevailing opinion on something.
You're in California. There's a guy called Rick Grinnell in California who's become a sensation on Pakistani social media in the past month and a bit,
Really?
simply for calling for the military dictatorship there to free Imran Khan. Now, this military dictatorship was patronized by the Blinken-Biden administration for years. And before Biden came in, it pitched itself with legacy politicians as an alternative to Trumpism in Pakistan, which they said Imran Khan was symbolic for. So Rick Grinnell throws himself in, and it completely blows up the Pakistani political social media space, and putting the regime there on the back foot. So anyways, I want you to tell us a little bit about, because it's like neoconservatism, neoliberalism, and
no, these are chaos. Look, so Rick Grinnell is a chaos agent, right? He's a paid political operative, and I met him at a TV studio when I was talking about Bo Bergdahl, right? And he was on he was there, and he was on Fox, and I think I was on CNN or something like that. And he was talking about how Bo Bergdahl was teaching the Taliban how to shoot, and he'd become a terrorist and praying 12 times a day, and I said, where did you come up with that? Like, that's completely fictitious. I know exactly where he is, and I know exactly what he's doing, and you're lying, right? And he just said, well, my sources are better than yours, which is not true at all. So he goes into places and he throws bombs, right? And he does it for money. He works as a paid lobbyist for something.
Listen, he would disagree, and in places like Pakistan, these bombs are seen as liberation, by the vast majority of people.
Right, but this is the spark, right? You have divisions, and you inflame them, and you begin ramping up the rhetoric so that people get really angry, and then somebody gets killed, and then a bunch of people get killed. Then they start killing each other. Now, is that a negotiating tactic? Sort of, but it's for him, it's more of a paid occupation. He's worked in the Balkans. He's worked as a lobbyist for very strange countries.
Pakistan and the US are known for that transactional relationship. You give me something, I'll give you something. It's not strategic. It's only momentary and, transactionary, essentially. And that kind of fits into the Trump mold.
Well, remember something, that we don't know what to do in South Asia. America had a policy for many, many years of using it as a foreign killing field for Russians and foreigners, right? It then became our place where we chased around Islamic terrorists. And then we started creating Islamic terrorists. And then we realized, like, the more you hit the person, the more he hits you back. If you stop hitting him, he doesn't hit you back. And then Obama tried, but the military wouldn't let him. Finally, Trump just pulled the rug out from underneath the troops, and we pulled out. Now, in that mix is a fallacy that Afghanistan is the home of terrorism, that all these radical ideas came from Afghanistan. We still believe that. Nobody's changed that opinion, right? And that we don't focus too much on the Saudi influence in Pakistan, the generations of foreign influence, and also the internal tribal divisions and the political divisions, and whatever, because it's just too much for Americans. You either have a black hat or a white hat. So Pakistan has essentially been taken over by China strategically, right? So right now you have a different battle. It's not terrorism. It's basically for access to the world's trade routes. And Pakistan very much is needed by China to get their products into the sea and over to Africa and vice versa. But they don't have a security solution, right? They don't have a way. They're hoping that Pakistan can provide the security that allows China to create this big core, and they're hoping that this happens in Africa. But there are other people like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Russia, that are actually fighting against this, that are undermining those activities so that it's very dangerous and very expensive to move your goods through certain corridors, and they're setting up alternative corridors that'll compete with that. So America would only view Pakistan as part of some trade corridor, not necessarily a security agreement, whereas before it was always about security, right? And we used to work with the ISI.
Well, there is an element here with the Quad, right?
Yes.
You've got India, you've got Japan, you've got Australia and the United States, all trying to contain China or playing this game. And if you look at Trump's cabinet selections, you have a lot of China hawks, right? You've got the NSA, you've got Marco Rubio, You've got Hackset. So all these guys are known to have anti-China positions.
Well, first of all, some of those people I wouldn't even hire to babysit my dog. I mean, you remember these are just sort of people he threw at the wall. It's the next layer down you have to look at, right? Who's really making the decisions? It's not the head of the Pentagon, it's the deputy, right? So the people that have been installed at the next level down are not only competent, but they're also fans of outsourcing a lot of the military and intelligence activities. And that's not good news from Pakistan, because we would go into a relationship not necessarily with the government, but an element of the population that we thought could control it. Now, we did that in Afghanistan with the Haqqanis. I mean, it blew my mind, but I guess, okay, Haqqanis are a lot smarter than we are. So we now live in peace with the Haqqanis. And okay, they always ran the border, even during the 80s when we gave them money to smuggle things, to kill the Russians. So these people are smarter than us because they live there and they control everything. They control the government, whatever. So we may or may not have a more sophisticated system than just creating like friendship with the government, because the government changes. People like the Haqqanis are not going to change. But we're also competing with very violent partners who want to either destroy or hinder whatever it is China's doing or whatever we're doing.
And now with Israel in Syria, there's talk within Israel that Turkey and Israel are coming to a direct conflict.
Well, okay, so there is so much history in that one region, And when I was asking my Turkish friends, why are you sending all these Syrian mercenaries to Libya, right? He said, well, it's better that they fight each other over here than over there. In other words, there's these ethnic lines and histories that I don't even. So in the Turkish mind, the Syrians just fight all the time, they're in their country as refugees, and they don't necessarily pose a threat, but they will start fighting over whatever it is, and so in their mind, they just want to get them into a war away from them so they can go fight with each other. And I thought, I could study history for 100 years and I would never understand the deep underlying currents, of what drives these people to think like they do. And same with Israel. You have very Orthodox Jews who say, why are you talking about this Israel thing? And we have nothing to do with Israel. We're Jews, we're Americans, we're, whatever. We want nothing to do with the Zionist thing. And America is just sort of grasping that Zionism is like this weird thing that actually has nothing to do with Judaism in the US, but it's been overlaid, right? So the historical context of what they're going to be doing in Syria may have a Zionist flavor to it, right? They just keep expanding as far as they can. And then, I don't know, are the Syrians going to...
Because that's what they're talking about, right? Expanding
Yeah.
it all the way into Saudi, the Arabian Peninsula, and basically creating this greater Israel project on steroids.
But it's the same thing the Americans did here, right? We showed up, little tiny compound, and then we said, hey.
Or in Canada.
Yeah, in Canada. But Canada didn't slaughter all the Indians. This is the difference. Like in America, they just said, let's go for it. Let's just kill everybody, take it. And, America has a lot of historical baggage that affects how they view the rest of the world, right? And Americans argue a lot about politics. And when I was in Canada, I left in 1980, but when I was in Canada, you'd argue about politics, you'd argue about hockey, you'd argue about whatever, but it wasn't like I hate you and I'm going to kill you or don't talk to me again. America has become very divisive, where they pre-label you as being the other guy. They call you a name and then they start arguing with you. And that has been since Trump. That has been very clearly defined under, MAGA and Trump's marketing empire.
Very quickly, I want you to tell me about Zionism. Just expand on what you were talking about. And now, because there's so much self-censorship, I've been working with the CBC here since March, after a gap of like 12 years. Last time was under Stephen Harper. After I left Turkey, I came back. And we had protests outside the CBC here in Vancouver every Saturday for months. And we didn't cover a single one. On New Year's here, we had, they crossed off Granville where all the revelry was happening. And
Yeah.
then a mass pro-Palestine, about 400 to 500 people showed up. There was a police cordon, and I was holding one camera on an Osmo, streaming that. We didn't even cut to it once on CBC.
Well, so here's the dilemma with Zionism and Pan-Arabism, right? That every nation does not have the right to exist because they disappear historically all the time, right? A religion doesn't have a right to exist because people are persecuted and, flip or whatever historically, right? And Zionism is not an either or thing. You choose to like, support, or dislike Zionism for what it is. You don't necessarily have to support Gaza. You don't have to flip around and be, because I don't like this, I like that. We've made it binary here. You can't have a choice. Like if I go on national news and I criticize Zionism or I support Zionism, it's inflammatory. It's a lot of people have very strong emotions about colonialism in the modern age, right? And particularly religious colonialism in an area where there's so many other conflicts that go back, God knows, 5,000 years, right? So it's not conducive to news gathering in North America. I don't know about Europe. It's incredibly divisive because there are groups that will attack you. Like if you say something in support of this, you'll get attacked. You say something in support of the opposite thing, you'll get attacked. So people just shy away from it. In my book, The World's Most Dangerous Places, there's a chapter on Israel because it is a war zone, right? And that's been like that going back to the 40s, right? Well, I would be making a presentation and the guy would like, why did you put Israel in the book? And I said, well, because it's a war zone and you have to know that. Another guy said, there is a war, we're at war, blah, blah, blah. And they would start arguing with each other in the audience without me being a participant. So I'm just saying it's an incredibly divisive thing. And news should cover it. News should go deep on that stuff because, we cover Islamic terrorism to a certain degree, but we don't go deep enough to understand that a terrorist is a sort of Western defined term. And it's also a very convenient term. If you're in the Emirates, for example, a terrorist is a Muslim Brotherhood who's technically a communist who wants socialism. It's just, we don't get that deep into it. So Zionism, Islamic topics are just like, we can't talk about that. And we should.
But now people are talking. It's not that the conversation.
Well, they're talking outside of the news media. You and I are.
The news media is irrelevant, right? Because we talk,
right.
And I think I don't agree with Elon Musk, but the news media or legacy media is done. Nobody gets their news off of that. And
well, they do.
If there's a mass suppression.
The legacy media still provides information because the internet feeds off the legacy media to do all the news references, right? So they serve a purpose, but they're old. They're slow and they're old. The internet has no filter, has no quality standard. So if you and I are talking about something, there's no way to rate whether what you and I are talking about is important or trivial, right? You can say it's clicks, but it's not really. I mean, I could show my boobs and I'd make more clicks than talking about the history of the world. So we don't have a reference for social intercourse in which a scientist, let's say, talks to another scientist about an opposing view and it's very interesting and we learn something. There's no measure for that, right? And it definitely doesn't play well on social media. I watch YouTube videos and I find some incredible nuggets amongst the, I fixed my car and, whatever, of professors explaining everything from history to DNA to, I don't know how they make any money. So it would be nice if there was a collective of intelligent internet-based information, but there isn't. So people like Rick Grinnell flourish. People like Donald Trump flourish because they go for the base reaction. They go for something that they know is going to upset somebody and then suddenly just shift the entire conversation from I hate you, no, I hate you, and they get the attention.
But I think a most significant point that you made earlier, Robert, and I think we'll close it from this point, is that the United States and Israel, or in fact North America and Israel, are quite similar, as in they're both colonial projects. And I think at this moment in time, the debate, or there's a broader issue here, it's decolonization essentially. It's or anti-imperialism in some ways.
Well, I'm going to be devil's advocate, and I'll throw a history book at you and say it is actually natural for powerful nations, once they're unleashed and once they've invested in their military, whether it be Germany or Israel, to keep expanding. And look at Russia and look at, so once you've got a military mindset, once you've got an excuse to keep rolling, what would stop the Israelis from taking as much land, which historically they have done, right? Take as much land as possible and negotiate it back, or just keep it. So I'm not judging. I'm just saying that historically, once you have a militarized nation, they keep going. I don't see any hard red lines other than Egypt, where they built a giant wall, for Israel to stop moving in the north. And I don't see them stopping in the West Bank, and I don't see them stopping anytime soon. Now, will they have this sort of greater Israel? I don't know. It's, but land is a key part of their national identity now.
Thank you so much, Robert Young.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure. It's the first time I reached out to you and you agreed to be on this little known podcast.
My pleasure. We'll talk again.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Robert Young Pelton. Pleasure having him on. And what do you think? Let us know in the comment section. It was a long conversation. Do like, subscribe, and share this content. Take care.